The gardener warned the millionaire to be careful with her best friend. The next day, a luxury car stopped in front of her house. Jake Thompson took a deep breath before walking through the grand gates of the Hartwell mansion. At 23, after a life marked by foster homes and reformatories, he never imagined he'd be stepping into a world so different from his own. His gardener's uniform felt out of place in that setting of luxury and wealth. "Don't mess this up," he muttered to himself, gripping the cleaning cart tightly. This job was his chance to finally build a better life. As he entered the mansion, Jake was awestruck by the opulence around him. Crystal chandeliers, Persian rugs, and artworks that probably cost more than he'd earned in his entire life. He felt small and insignificant in such an environment. He started cleaning carefully, determined to do a good job. But as he dusted a shelf full of expensive objects, his elbow knocked into an ornate vase. Jake watched in horror as the vase wobbled and crashed to the floor, shattering into 1,000 pieces. "No, no, no!" he exclaimed, panicking. His mind raced, trying to figure out how he could pay for something so expensive. Desperate, he began gathering the shards, cutting his finger in the process. "What's going on here?" A commanding female voice cut through the air. Jake turned to see a young, elegant woman standing in the doorway, looking at the scene with a shocked and angry expression. I'm so sorry," Jake stammered, standing up quickly. "It was an accident. I'll pay for it, I swear." The woman, who Jake realized was Olivia Hartwell, the owner of the mansion, laughed without humor. "Pay? With what money? That vase was worth more than you probably make in a year." Her words hit Jake like a slap. He felt anger boiling inside him. "Look, I said I'm sorry. It was an accident. You don't have to treat me like garbage just because you're rich and I'm just a gardener." Olivia seemed surprised by his response. Her eyes narrowed. "Do you have any idea who I am? I could have you fired with a single phone call." Jake swallowed hard but stood his ground. "I know exactly who you are. Someone who judges people by what they have, not by who they are." A tense silence filled the air between them. Olivia seemed ready to reply when the sound of voices from another room caught Jake's attention. He recognized one of the voices as Samantha, Olivia's best friend, whom he'd seen in photos around the mansion. "She can't find out about the embezzlement," Jake heard Samantha say in a hushed tone. "If Olivia finds out we've been siphoning money from the company, we're done for." Jake froze, unsure of what to do with the information he had just overheard. He looked at Olivia, who was still glaring at him, completely unaware of the conversation happening just a few feet away. In that moment, Jake had to make a decision. Should he keep quiet and protect his job, or warn Olivia about what he had just heard? The answer came faster than he expected. "Miss Hartwell," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "I know you hate me right now, but there's something you need to know." Olivia looked at Jake with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. "What are you talking about?" Jake took a deep breath, fighting the urge to just walk away. "I heard your friend Samantha talking about embezzling money from your company." Olivia's face hardened. "That's a serious accusation. Are you sure about what you heard?" Jake nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "I am. She was talking to someone about hiding it from you." Olivia remained silent for a moment, her gaze distant. Jake could see the wheels turning in her mind. "You can go now," she finally said. "Don't mention this to anyone." Jake left, feeling both relieved and worried. He hoped he hadn't made a mistake. In the days that followed, Olivia acted as if nothing had changed. She greeted Samantha with the same usual smile, spoke with her accountant like everything was normal. But inside, she was on high alert. She started paying more attention to conversations, reviewing documents she had once signed without reading. Slowly, the pieces began to fall into place. Numbers that didn't add up, suspicious transfers, contracts with strange clauses. Each discovery felt like a knife to Olivia's chest. After 2 weeks of discreet investigation, she had all the proof she needed. The scheme was bigger than she had imagined. Samantha and the accountant had embezzled millions over the years. Olivia called a meeting with the two of them in her office. Her heart was pounding, but her voice was firm when they walked in. "Sit down," she ordered. "We have a lot to discuss." Samantha smiled, unaware of the tension in the room. "What's up, Liv? You look serious." Olivia threw a folder on the table. "I want you to explain this." The accountant picked up the folder, his hand trembling slightly. As he opened it, his face went pale. "Olivia, this isn't what it looks like," Samantha began, but Olivia cut her off. "It's not what it looks like? Then explain. Explain how millions disappeared from the company's accounts. Explain the fake contracts, the transfers to offshore accounts." The accountant stammered, trying to come up with an excuse. Samantha stayed silent, her face a mask of guilt. "How long?" Olivia asked, her voice filled with pain. "How long have you been stealing from me?" Samantha finally spoke. "Liv, you don't understand. We deserved more. You always had everything, and we—" "And you what?" Olivia shouted, slamming the table. "Decided to betray me? Steal from me? I trusted you." The room fell silent, the tension thick in the air. "You're fired," Olivia said to the accountant. "And as for you, Samantha, I never want to see your face again." "Olivia, please," Samantha begged. "We've been friends for years. Don't throw that away." "Friends?" Olivia laughed bitterly. "Friends don't steal from each other. Get out of my house. Now." As they left, Olivia collapsed into her chair, tears finally streaming down her face. The betrayal hurt more than she ever thought possible. Hours later, exhausted and with red eyes, Olivia found Jake cleaning one of the hallways. "You were right," she said simply. Jake stopped what he was doing, surprised by her approach. "I'm sorry," he replied, not knowing what else to say. Olivia studied him for a moment. "Why did you tell me? You could have stayed quiet, kept your job without complications." Jake shrugged. "It wouldn't have been right. I've made too many mistakes in my life to add another one to the list." Something in Jake's raw honesty struck a chord with Olivia. For the first time, she saw him not just as a gardener, but as a person. "Would you like to have dinner with me tomorrow?" she asked, surprising herself. "As a thank you." Jake blinked, confused. "Me? Have dinner with you?" Olivia nodded. "Unless you have other plans." "No, I'd love to," Jake replied, still in disbelief at the invitation. "Great," Olivia said, a small smile forming on her lips. 8 o'clock then." As she walked away, Jake stood there, holding his mop, trying to process what had just happened. Somehow, in the midst of the chaos, an unlikely connection had been made. Jake arrived at the Hartwell mansion at 8 o'clock sharp, feeling out of place in his best clothes. Olivia greeted him at the door, her smile a little nervous. "Welcome," she said, guiding him to the dining room. The initial silence was awkward. Jake fidgeted with his food, unsure of which fork to use. Olivia watched him, noticing his discomfort. "Don't worry about etiquette," she finally said. "Eat however you feel comfortable." Jake relaxed a bit. "Thanks. I'm not used to all of this." "I imagine not," Olivia replied. "What was your childhood like, Jake?" The question caught Jake off guard. He hesitated, then decided to be honest. "Tough," he admitted. "I went through several foster homes. Some were okay, others, not so much." Olivia listened intently as Jake shared fragments of his past. Nights without dinner, verbal abuse, the constant feeling of not belonging. "The hardest part was never knowing how long I'd stay in one place," Jake said, "always waiting for the next move." Olivia felt a wave of empathy. "That must have been really lonely." Jake nodded. "What about you? How was your childhood?" Olivia smiled sadly. "Privileged, but not always happy. My parents were always busy. I had everything, accept attention? The conversation flowed more easily after that. Olivia talked about the pressure of inheriting the family business, the endless expectations. And then I met my husband, she said. He was my safe harbor. Jake noticed the change in her voice. What happened to him? Olivia took a deep breath. Cancer. It's been 2 years. I'm sorry, Jake said softly. Since then, it's been lonely, Olivia admitted. Everyone wants something from me. Money, favors, connections. It's hard to know who to trust. Jake understood the weight of that confession. That's why Samantha's betrayal hurt so much. Olivia nodded, surprised by Jake's insight. Exactly. They continued talking, discovering more similarities than differences. Both knew loneliness, the struggle to find their place in the world. At one point, Jake made Olivia laugh with a story from his rebellious teenage years. She threw her head back, her laughter echoing through the room. Jake found himself admiring how her eyes sparkled. Olivia noticed Jake's gaze and felt a warmth in her chest. For a moment, the air between them was charged with a different kind of tension. Jake leaned in slightly, almost without realizing it. Olivia didn't pull away. The moment was broken by the shrill ring of Olivia's phone. She startled, snapping back to reality. Sorry, I have to take this, she said, standing up. It's about an important deal. Jake nodded, feeling a bit dizzy from what almost happened. He listened as Olivia spoke quickly on the phone, her voice returning to the professional tone he recognized. When she returned, something had shifted. The businesswoman's mask was back, but not entirely. There was a softness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Sorry about that, Olivia said. Where were we? Jake smiled. You were telling me about your first day running the company. They resumed their conversation, but something had changed. There was a new awareness between them, a mutual understanding that went beyond their social positions. As the night came to an end, Jake got ready to leave. At the door, he turned to Olivia. Thanks for dinner, he said. It was unexpected. Olivia smiled. Yes, it was. She hesitated for a moment, then quickly spoke. Listen, there's an important charity event next week. I usually take Samantha, but... She left the sentence hanging. Jake understood the implication. You want me to go? He asked, surprised. Olivia nodded. I know it's sudden, and it's probably not your kind of thing, but... I'd love to, Jake interrupted, surprising them both with his quick response. Olivia's smile widened. Great. I'll send you the details. As Jake walked to his car, he couldn't stop thinking about how surreal the night had been. From gardener to guest at a gala event in just a few days. Olivia watched him leave from the window, a whirlwind of emotions in her chest. She didn't know what to expect from this new development, but for the first time in a long while, she felt excited about the possibilities. Both of them slept restlessly that night, replaying every moment of the dinner, every word exchanged. Something had shifted, and neither Jake nor Olivia knew exactly where it would lead them. Jake nervously adjusted the tie of his rented tuxedo as he stepped into the hotel's ballroom. The glittering chandeliers and the hum of conversations hit him like a wave. Olivia, radiant in her evening gown, gave him an encouraging smile. Ready? She asked. Jake swallowed hard. I think so. They had barely taken a few steps when the stairs began. Jake could feel the guests' eyes on him, sizing him up, judging him. Barely disguised whispers followed him. Who is he? What's Olivia Hartwell thinking? It must be some kind of charity. Jake tried to ignore the comments, focusing on not tripping or knocking something over. Olivia, sensing his discomfort, held his arm protectively. Ignore them, she whispered. They don't matter. But it was hard to ignore the looks when everyone who approached glanced at Jake as if he were an intruder. The introductions were brief and cold, with smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Things got worse when a tall, well-dressed man approached, his fake smile barely hiding the disdain in his eyes. "Olivia, darling," he said, kissing her cheek. "It's been too long. And who's your friend?" "Bradley," Olivia responded, her voice tense. "This is Jake Thompson." Bradley looked Jake up and down. "Thompson? Don't recall the name. What family are you from?" Jake hesitated, but decided to be honest. "None you'd know. I grew up in foster care." The silence that followed was deafening. Bradley laughed, a cruel and mocking sound. "Olivia, you can't be serious," he said. "First, you turned down my proposal, and now you show up with this?" Jake felt his face burn with shame and anger. He was about to respond when Olivia stepped forward. "This thing has a name, Bradley," she said, her voice sharp. "And Jake is worth more as a person than you'll ever be." People around them gasped, shocked by Olivia's public declaration. Bradley's face turned red with anger. "You'll regret this, Olivia," he hissed before walking away. Jake looked at Olivia, surprised and grateful. "You didn't have to do that." Olivia smiled. "Yes, I did. And it was my pleasure." The rest of the evening remained tense, but Jake began to feel more confident. He watched how Olivia navigated the conversation skillfully and decided to try the same. His chance came when a group of businessmen began discussing a new urban revitalization project. Jake, who knew the neighborhoods well, couldn't help but chime in. "With all due respect," he said, surprising everyone, "this plan will displace hundreds of low-income families. Have you considered including affordable housing in the project?" The silence that followed was broken by one of the businessmen. "And what do you know about that, young man?" Jake smiled. "I grew up in those neighborhoods. I know the people who will be affected. Maybe I can offer a different perspective." To everyone's surprise, including Jake's, the conversation that followed was lively and productive. The businessmen, initially skeptical, began asking questions and considering Jake's ideas. Olivia watched the scene with a mix of pride and admiration. Jake had turned a potentially embarrassing situation into an opportunity to prove his worth. At the end of the night, as they said their goodbyes to the guests, Olivia couldn't help but notice how some of the looks had changed. There was still suspicion, but also curiosity and, in some cases, reluctant respect. "You were amazing," she told Jake when they were finally alone. Jake smiled, tired but satisfied. "Thanks for giving me this chance." They didn't notice the discreet flashes of cell phone cameras capturing their moments together. The next morning, social media would explode with photos of Olivia Hartwell and her mysterious companion. Olivia's phone started ringing non-stop as soon as she woke up. Messages, emails, and calls, all wanting to know who the man was that she had attended the event with. Olivia looked at one of the photos circulating online. In it, she and Jake were smiling at each other, unaware of the world around them. There was an intimacy in the image that she hadn't noticed in the moment. Her publicist was in a panic, demanding an official statement. Friends and business associates wanted explanations. The press was sniffing out a scandal. Meanwhile, Jake woke up in his small apartment, unaware of the storm brewing. His phone rang. It was Olivia. "Jake," she said, her voice tense, "I think we have a problem." Jake walked through his neighborhood streets, feeling the hostile stares from his neighbors. The photos of him with Olivia at the gala event had spread quickly, even reaching here. "Look at the Prince Charming," someone shouted. "Forgot where you came from, Jake?" He tried to ignore it, but the words hit him like stones. At the corner store, Mr. Martinez, who had always been friendly, barely looked at Jake. "I didn't think you were the type to sell out, kid," Mr. Martinez said, shaking his head in disappointment. Jake felt his anger rise. "I didn't sell out. Olivia is my friend." "Friend?" Mr. Martinez laughed without humor. "People like her aren't friends with people like us." Jake left the store, frustrated and hurt. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Olivia. "I lost 2 important contracts today." Shareholders are nervous about the negative publicity. Can we talk? Jake responded immediately, agreeing to meet with her. Meanwhile, in her luxurious office, Samantha stared at the photos of Jake and Olivia, hatred in her eyes. Her plan for revenge was beginning to take shape. "I want to know everything about this Jake Thompson," she said to the man sitting in front of her. "Every sordid detail of his life." The private investigator nodded. "Consider it done, Mrs. Rivers." Back at Jake's apartment, his best friend, Mike, was waiting for him. "What the hell are you doing, man?" Mike asked as soon as Jake walked in. Jake sighed. "What are you talking about?" "Those pictures with the rich girl. You're letting them use you, man. That's what they do. They show you off like a trophy and then toss you aside." "It's not like that, Mike," Jake tried to explain. "Olivia's different." Mike shook his head. "You're blind, man. They're not like us. They never will be." The argument grew heated. In the end, Mike stormed out, leaving Jake with a heavy heart. Hours later, Jake met Olivia at a quiet cafe. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes. "How are you?" he asked, concerned. Olivia gave a weak smile. "I've had better days. How about you?" Jake told her about the hostility in the neighborhood and the fight with Mike. Olivia listened carefully, her expression growing darker. "I'm sorry, Jake," she said. "All of this is my fault. I never should have dragged you into this world." Jake took her hand across the table. "Hey, I'm an adult. I made my own decisions." Olivia looked at their joined hands, feeling a comforting warmth. "Thank you for not abandoning me in this mess." "Never," Jake replied, his voice firm. They spent the next few hours talking, venting about the pressures they were facing. Despite the difficult circumstances, they both felt their bond growing stronger. Meanwhile, the investigator hired by Samantha was digging into Jake's past. He scoured records, interviewed people from Jake's past, and followed leads. Finally, after days of searching, he found something promising. Records from a juvenile detention center where Jake had spent a few months as a teenager. Even more interesting, a theft charge that had been mysteriously dropped. The investigator smiled, knowing he had struck gold. He picked up the phone to call Samantha. "Mrs. Rivers? I think I found exactly what you were looking for." Samantha listened to the investigator's report with a growing smile on her face. Finally, she had the weapons she needed to destroy Jake and, in turn, hurt Olivia. "Excellent work," she said. "Prepare a full dossier. I want every dirty detail of Jake Thompson's life." As Samantha schemed, Jake and Olivia left the cafe, feeling lighter despite the challenges they faced. They didn't know it, but the storm ahead would be far worse than they could have imagined. "Thanks for today," Olivia said, smiling at Jake. "I don't know what I'd do without you right now." Jake smiled back. "We're in this together, remember?" They said goodbye with a hug, unaware that they were being photographed from a distance. More fuel for the fire that was about to consume their lives. That night, Jake lay in his bed, thinking about how much his life had changed in such a short time. He knew the road ahead would be tough, but something inside him told him it would be worth it. Olivia, in her mansion, stared out the window, thinking of Jake. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone. But the fear of what might happen next kept her awake. Neither of them knew that, at that very moment, Samantha was reviewing a file that had the potential to destroy everything they were building. The stage was set for the next act of this drama, and no one was ready for what was to come. Jake paced back and forth in his small apartment, his heart heavy with the decision he had to make. He knew his past would surface sooner or later, and he preferred Olivia to hear the truth from him. With trembling hands, he picked up the phone and called Olivia. "Can we meet? There's something I need to tell you." Hours later, they sat on a secluded park bench. Jake took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "Olivia, there are things about my past that you need to know," he began. "Things I'm not proud of, but they're part of who I am." Olivia looked at him anxiously, but nodded for him to continue. Jake spoke about his troubled teenage years, his time in juvenile detention centers, and the bad company he kept. His voice shook as he reached the hardest part. "When I was 16, I was accused of theft," he said. "I was innocent, but all the evidence pointed to me. It was the worst time of my life." Olivia listened silently, her face a mask of shock and confusion. Jake continued, explaining how he eventually proved his innocence, but the stigma remained. "I fought hard to overcome that, to become a better person." When he finished, the silence between them was palpable. Olivia seemed lost in thought, processing everything she had just heard. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake lowered his eyes. "I was afraid of losing you, of you seeing me differently." Olivia abruptly stood up. I need some time to think about all this." She walked away, leaving Jake alone on the bench, feeling as if he had just lost everything. In the days that followed, Olivia's silence was deafening. Jake tried calling, sending messages, but got no response. Meanwhile, Samantha, who had somehow heard about Jake's revelations, saw her chance to act. She visited Olivia at her office. "Dear, I heard about the sordid past of your new friend," Samantha said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "You need to be careful. People like that don't change." Olivia, still confused and hurt, didn't respond. Samantha continued, planting more seeds of doubt. Desperate to prove he had changed, Jake decided to confront his past head-on. He returned to the last juvenile detention center he had been in, now a rehabilitation center for young people. Walking through the familiar halls, Jake was flooded with memories. The anger, the fear, the feeling of being trapped in an endless cycle. But something had changed. The young people he saw now weren't so different from who he was back then. But Jake wasn't that lost boy anymore. He had grown, evolved. Talking to some of the youths, Jake found himself sharing his story, offering hope. For the first time, he saw his past not as a stain, but as a tool to help others. Meanwhile, Olivia was battling her own demons. Prejudices she didn't even know she had began to surface. She found herself questioning everything she knew about Jake, about relationships, about trust. After days of reflection, Olivia finally made a decision. She picked up the phone and sent Jake a message. "Can we talk?" Jake, who had spent the last few days in agony, felt a mix of relief and fear when he saw the message. This was the moment of truth. Either Olivia would accept him, past and all, or this would be the end of everything they had built. With his heart in his throat, Jake replied, "Of course. Where and when?" Olivia's response was quick. "The park? In an hour." Jake prepared himself for what could be the most important meeting of his life, not knowing if he was walking toward a new beginning or a definitive end. The event hall at Heartwarming Enterprises was packed. Executives, investors, and journalists mingled, all eager to hear Olivia's announcement about the company's new project. Jake was there, feeling uncomfortable in his new suit, but determined to support Olivia. Olivia stepped onto the stage, smiling confidently. "Good evening, everyone. I'm happy to announce that Heartwarming Enterprises is..." Her speech was cut short by the blaring sound of sirens. The hall doors flew open, and a group of armed police officers stormed in. "Jake Thompson," shouted one of the officers, "you're under arrest for the theft of $5 million from Heartwarming Enterprises." A shocked silence fell over the room. All eyes turned to Jake, who froze, unable to process what was happening. "There must be some mistake," he managed to say as the officers handcuffed him. Olivia came down from the stage, her face a mix of confusion and horror. "What's going on? Jake didn't do any of this." A detective approached, holding a folder. "Ms. Hartwell, we have solid evidence. Bank transfers, emails, even a recorded confession." He opened the folder, revealing documents that looked incriminating. Olivia examined them, her face growing paler with each page. This can't be true, she muttered. Jake was led out, under the relentless flashes of cameras. Reporters shouted questions, hungry for details of the scandal. Olivia! Jake yelled as he was dragged away. I swear I didn't do this. You have to believe me. Olivia stood still, torn between her heart, which wanted to trust Jake, and her mind, which couldn't ignore the evidence. In the hours that followed, the news spread like wildfire. Every TV station broadcasted the story, "Conman boyfriend steals from millionaire." Social media exploded with theories and judgments. Olivia locked herself in her office, trying to figure out how everything had gone so wrong. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing, lawyers, executives, all demanding explanations. Ms. Hartwell, her legal advisor, said, entering the room, "We need to release a statement distancing yourself from Mr. Thompson immediately." Olivia looked at him, feeling lost. What if he's innocent? The lawyer sighed. With all due respect, the evidence is overwhelming. We need to protect the company. Meanwhile, at the police station, Jake was being interrogated relentlessly. He denied everything, but the detectives seemed to have an answer for every one of his explanations. "How do you explain this recording?" one detective asked, playing an audio file where Jake's voice discussed details of the theft. Jake was stunned. "That's fake. I never said any of that." But even to his own ears, his denial sounded weak. How could anyone have fabricated such convincing evidence? Back at the Hartwell mansion, Olivia was fighting an internal battle. All the evidence pointed to Jake's guilt, but something in her heart refused to believe it. She picked up a photo of the two of them together, remembering all the moments they shared. How could someone who seemed so sincere, so genuine, be such a skilled liar? Her phone rang again. It was Samantha. "Olivia, honey," Samantha's voice was filled with concern. "I just saw the news. How are you holding up?" Olivia hesitated. I don't know, Sam. It all feels so unreal." "I warned you about him," Samantha said gently. "Men like Jake only want one thing. At least you found out before it was too late." Samantha's words echoed in Olivia's mind. Had she been that naive? That night, Olivia barely slept. She replayed every moment with Jake, every conversation, every look. Had it all been a lie? The next morning, she made a decision. Against all the advice of her lawyers and advisors, she made a call. "Mr. Davidson? This is Olivia Hartwell. I need your services." Ms. Hartwell, the voice of the city's most renowned lawyer, sounded surprised. "How can I assist you?" Olivia took a deep breath. "I want you to defend Jake Thompson." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. "Are you sure about this? The evidence against him is quite substantial." "I am," Olivia replied, her voice steady for the first time in days. "Everyone deserves a fair defense. And if there's even the slightest chance that Jake is innocent, I want to make sure he has the best possible representation." Meanwhile, in his cell, Jake stared out of the small window, feeling more alone than ever. He wondered if Olivia believed him, if anyone did. What he didn't know was that at that very moment, his best chance of proving his innocence was on its way. The legal battle was about to begin, and no one could predict the outcome. The courtroom was packed on the first day of Jake Thompson's trial. Journalists jostled for the best seats. Cameras aimed to capture every moment of the spectacle about to unfold. Jake entered, escorted by police officers, his face tense but determined. His eyes met Olivia's, sitting in the front row. She gave him a small, encouraging smile. The prosecutor opened the case with a strong statement. Jake Thompson is nothing more than a swindler who deceived Olivia Hartwell and stole millions from her company. Jake's lawyer, Mr. Davidson, countered. "My client is the victim of an elaborate setup. The evidence has been fabricated." The following days were an emotional roller coaster. Former reform schoolmates of Jake were called to testify. Jake was always trouble, one of them said, always looking for an easy way to make money. But another offered a different perspective. Jake was tough, yeah, but he was also the guy who stood up for the weak. He had a good heart. The revelations about Jake's past shocked the public. His time in reform schools, the theft accusation from which he was exonerated, all came to light. The prosecutor painted the picture of a born criminal. This man has a history of criminal behavior. The theft of Heartwell Enterprises is just the peak of a life of crime. But Mr. Davidson skillfully pushed back. What we see here is the story of a man who overcame adversity, who fought to change his life. The most tense moment came when Olivia was called to testify. She stepped up to the witness stand, fully aware that every word she said would be closely scrutinized. Ms. Heartwell, the prosecutor began, how do you explain the bank transfers made from the company's account to Mr. Thompson's account? Olivia took a deep breath. Those transfers never happened. I personally reviewed all the company's accounts. Are you suggesting that the evidence was falsified? I'm stating that categorically, Olivia responded, her voice firm. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge slammed the gavel, demanding order. The prosecutor pressed on. Ms. Heartwell, isn't it true that you have a personal relationship with the defendant? Couldn't that cloud your judgment? Olivia didn't hesitate. My relationship with Jake has nothing to do with the facts of this case. He is innocent, and I'm here to tell the truth, not to protect him. As the trial continued, Mr. Davidson and his team worked tirelessly behind the scenes. They began to notice inconsistencies in the evidence presented by the prosecution. Look at this, Davidson said to Jake during a break. The timestamps on the emails don't match. Someone tampered with them. Jake felt a spark of hope. Could this prove my innocence? It might be the start, Davidson replied, but we need more. As the trial progressed, public opinion began to shift. What started as an almost unanimous condemnation of Jake turned into a heated debate about justice and second chances. Outside the courtroom, Jake and Olivia had a private moment. Thank you for believing in me, Jake said, his voice thick with emotion. Olivia took his hand. I know you, Jake. The real man, not the image they're trying to create. That moment of connection was captured by a hidden photographer, becoming the front page image of the newspapers the next day. On the second to last day of the trial, when it seemed that all the cards were on the table, Olivia's phone rang during a break. It was her private investigator. Ms. Heartwell, I've found something that will change everything, he said, his voice urgent. I need you to come to my office immediately. Olivia glanced at Jake, who was being led back to his cell. She knew that whatever this discovery was, it could be his last chance. I'm on my way, she replied, her heart racing. As Olivia rushed to uncover this new information, Jake returned to his cell, exhausted but not defeated. He knew that no matter the outcome, Olivia would be by his side. That certainty gave him the strength to face whatever was coming. The courtroom prepared for what promised to be the final, most dramatic day of the trial. No one knew that a twist was about to unfold, one that would change the course of not just this case, but the lives of everyone involved. The courtroom was silent when Olivia entered, carrying a thick folder. She approached Mr. Davidson and handed him the documents with a meaningful glance. Jake's lawyer quickly skimmed through the contents, his eyes widening. He stood up abruptly. Your Honor, we have crucial new evidence to present. The judge nodded, allowing the presentation. Davidson began to reveal the findings from Olivia's investigator. This evidence proves, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that all charges against Jake Thompson were fabricated, he declared. Here we have records of falsified bank transfers, forged emails, and even the confession of a computer technician hired to create these fabrications. The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs. The prosecutor tried to object, but the judge allowed Davidson to continue. More importantly, the lawyer went on, we have concrete proof that this entire scheme was orchestrated by Samantha Rivers, a a former friend and business partner of Miss Hartwell. At that moment, all eyes turned to Samantha, who was sitting in the gallery. Her face visibly paled. Davidson continued presenting the evidence, dismantling each accusation against Jake. As the truth came to light, Samantha abruptly stood up and bolted for the exit. "Stop her!" the judge shouted. Two bailiffs intercepted Samantha before she could reach the doors. The scene of her arrest was chaotic, with Samantha shouting accusations and threats as she was handcuffed. The judge banged his gavel repeatedly, demanding order in the court. When silence finally returned, he turned to Jake. "Mr. Thompson, in light of this new evidence, all charges against you are dismissed. You are free to go." Jake stood motionless for a moment, unable to believe what he had just heard. Then, slowly, a smile began to spread across his face. The courtroom erupted in a mix of applause and cheers. Reporters scrambled to use their phones, eager to be the first to break the news. Jake turned to Olivia, who was both crying and smiling. They embraced tightly, ignoring the cameras and the commotion around them. "It's over," Olivia whispered. "It's all over." Hours later, far from the media frenzy, Jake and Olivia finally had a moment alone. They were in the Hartwell Mansion's garden, sitting on a bench under the stars. "I still can't believe it," Jake said, shaking his head. "How did you get all that evidence?" Olivia smiled. "I never stopped believing in you, Jake. I hired the best investigator I could find, and he didn't rest until he uncovered the truth." Jake took her hand, his expression serious. "Olivia, I don't know how to thank you. You risked everything for me." "I'd do it all again," she replied softly. "You're worth it, Jake." They sat in silence for a moment, letting the relief and gratitude wash over them. Then, suddenly, Jake stood up, surprising Olivia. "There's something I want to ask you," he said, suddenly looking nervous. "I was going to wait for the perfect moment, but after everything we've been through, I realize there's no more perfect moment than this." Olivia looked at him, confused. "What is it, Jake?" Jake took a deep breath, and to Olivia's shock, he knelt down in front of her. "Olivia Hartwell, you've taught me what true trust is, what it means to fight for someone against all odds. You've made me want to be a better person every day." He pulled a small box from his pocket. "I love you more than I ever thought it was possible to love someone. Will you marry me?" Olivia was speechless for a moment, tears welling up in her eyes. Then, with a radiant smile, she replied, "Yes, Jake. 1,000 times yes." Jake slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands trembling slightly. They kissed, sealing their promise under the starlit sky. In that moment, all the trials they had faced seemed distant. The future stretched out before them, full of possibilities. Meanwhile, in newspaper headlines and TV news reports, the story of Jake and Olivia unfolded like a modern fairy tale. The former gardener wrongfully accused and the heiress who risked everything for love had captured the public's imagination. What no one knew was that Jake and Olivia's journey was far from over. New challenges awaited them, but now they would face them together, stronger than ever. Jake adjusted the backpack on his shoulders and took a deep breath before stepping onto the university campus. At 23, he was significantly older than most freshmen. The contrast between his previous life as a gardener and his new reality as a student was striking. In the first few weeks, Jake struggled to keep up with the pace of the classes. Years away from school had dulled his academic skills. Late-night study sessions became his new routine, with Olivia often finding him asleep over his books. Meanwhile, Olivia was immersed in restructuring her company. The accusations against Jake had shaken the confidence of many investors. She spent days in meetings, reassuring partners, and revising strategies. One particularly stressful evening, Jake found Olivia surrounded by papers in her office. "You need to rest," he said, massaging her shoulders. Olivia sighed. "I can't. I have to finish this proposal for tomorrow." Jake took the papers from her hands. Let's take a break. Tell me about this foundation you want to create. Olivia's eyes lit up. It's for at-risk youth, like you once were. I want to offer education, job training, psychological support. Jake smiled. That's amazing, Liv. How can I help? This conversation marked the beginning of a new phase for the couple. Working together on the foundation project, they learned to combine their unique experiences. Jake brought the perspective of someone who had lived through hardships, while Olivia contributed her expertise in business. However, not everything was smooth. Their relationship was often the target of critical glances and malicious comments. The age difference between them, Jake being 23 and Olivia 35, was a constant source of gossip. At a dinner with Olivia's friends, one of them made a sarcastic remark about Jake being too young to understand certain topics. The silence that followed was tense. Jake took a deep breath before responding. Age is just a number. What matters is the connection we have, the mutual respect, and the love we feel for each other. Olivia squeezed his hand under the table, proud of his maturity. These situations, though uncomfortable, strengthened their bond. They learned to face prejudice together, standing up for their love against those who didn't understand it. As the months passed, Jake adapted to university life. His grades improved, and he began to excel in his business studies. Olivia, on the other hand, saw her company recover and grow under her new leadership. The foundation also started to take shape. Jake and Olivia spent hours discussing programs and strategies. He insisted on addressing practical problems he had faced, like access to housing and food. She focused on creating partnerships with businesses to offer job opportunities. One day, while visiting a community center where they planned to implement one of the foundation's programs, Jake suddenly stopped. "What is it?" Olivia asked, concerned. Jake pointed to a group of teenagers. "I used to be like them, hopeless, directionless. Look at me now." Olivia hugged him, feeling the weight of that realization. "You're incredible, Jake. And together, we're going to help many others like you." That night, as they lay in bed, Jake lazily traced circles on Olivia's back. "You know," he began, "I sometimes still wonder how we ended up together. A millionaire widow and a former gardener, young enough to be your younger brother." Olivia turned to face him. "Love knows no boundaries, Jake. Not class, not age. What we have is real and deep." Jake smiled, pulling her closer. "You're right. And that's why I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Olivia's eyes widened with sudden realization. "Jake, are you?" "Not yet," he laughed. "But soon. Very soon." Olivia kissed him, her heart overflowing with love and anticipation. In the weeks that followed, Olivia threw herself into preparations for the gala event that would officially launch the foundation. Jake noticed her growing agitation, but attributed it to the stress of the event. Little did he know that Olivia was planning a surprise that would change their lives forever. The event hall was filled with elegantly dressed guests. Jake adjusted his tie, feeling uncomfortable in his tuxedo. Olivia squeezed his hand, offering silent reassurance. "Are you ready?" she asked. Jake nodded, taking a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." The moment had arrived. Jake walked up to the stage, facing the crowd. His eyes found familiar faces, some friendly, others skeptical. He began his speech. 2 years ago, I was a gardener with no prospects. Today, I stand before you, not just as a college student, but as someone who has found his purpose." Jake paused, his voice gaining strength. "Our foundation isn't just about giving money. It's about giving hope, opportunities, and, above all, a chance to change lives." As Jake spoke, the audience visibly softened. He shared stories from his own journey and from other young people the foundation had already helped. Each of us has the power to make a difference. It doesn't matter where we come from. What matters is where we are going and who we choose to become. When Jake finished, the room erupted into applause. Olivia joined him on stage, her eyes shining with pride. Jake Thompson is not just the inspiration behind this foundation, she announced. He is living proof that change is possible. That's why I'm proud to announce that Jake will be the co-director of the Heartwell-Thompson Foundation. A murmur of surprise swept through the crowd. Jake looked at Olivia, stunned. Together, Olivia continued, "We believe we can make a lasting impact." And speaking of together, she turned to Jake, taking his hands. "Jake, would you do me the honor of becoming my husband?" The silence in the room was palpable. Jake, shocked for the second time in minutes, found his voice. "Yes, Olivia. 1,000 times, yes." The crowd erupted into cheers and congratulations. The couple embraced, symbolizing not just their love, but the union of two worlds many thought incompatible. In the weeks that followed, news of the engagement dominated the headlines. Many celebrated the unlikely love story, while others criticized the age and social differences between them. Jake and Olivia faced the public scrutiny head-on, more united than ever. 3 months later, they married in an intimate ceremony at the Heartwell Mansion. The place where Jake had once worked as a gardener now witnessed the official union of their lives. The vows they exchanged reflected their unique journey. Jake promised to always remember where he came from and use that perspective to do good. Olivia vowed never to take their love for granted and to keep growing alongside him. The reception was a fascinating mix of worlds. Jake's friends from his old neighborhood mingled with executives and socialites. Jake's foster mother, who had supported him through his hardest times, danced with one of Olivia's company directors. As they watched their guests, Jake whispered to Olivia, "Look at this. Who would have thought we could bring together so many different people?" Olivia smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "This is just the beginning, my love." 1 year later, Jake closed the book, smiling at the group of teenagers sitting in front of him at the community center. "Remember, you are the authors of your own stories. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't change your life." As the teens left, Jake felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Olivia, her slightly rounded belly showing under her loose dress. "How was class today?" she asked. "Amazing. These kids have so much potential. I can't wait to see what they achieve." Olivia smiled, placing her hand on her belly. "Our son is going to be lucky to have you as a father." Jake placed his hand over hers. "And you as a mother. I still can't believe that in just a few months, we'll be parents." They walked out of the center, hand in hand. The foundation had grown exponentially in the past year, impacting hundreds of lives. Jake, now a graduate, split his time between running the foundation and mentoring young people. "You know," Jake said, stopping to look into Olivia's eyes, "sometimes I wonder if all of this is real. If one day I'll wake up and find out it was just a dream." Olivia kissed him softly. "It's real, Jake. Every moment. And we're just getting started." As they walked home, the sun set on the horizon. It was a new dawn for Jake and Olivia, not just as a couple, but as agents of change in their community. Together, they had proven that true love knows no barriers, whether of class, age, or circumstance. And with that love as their foundation, they were building a legacy that would last for generations. After Olivia's surprising announcement, the gala turned into an impromptu engagement celebration. Jake and Olivia were surrounded by well-wishers, some sincere, others clearly perplexed by the sudden turn of events. Among the guests, Jake's best friend, Mike, approached with a wide grin. "Man, you've really made it, huh?" he joked, pulling Jake into a hug. Jake laughed, hugging him back. "Mike, you know it's not about that." Mike nodded, turning serious. "I know, man. I'm proud of you. You deserve all this happiness." On the other side of the room, Olivia was talking with her former mentor, Eleanor, a respected businesswoman who had always supported her career. "Olivia, darling, are you sure about this?" Eleanor asked, casting a concerned glance in Jake's direction. "He's so young." Olivia smiled, her gaze meeting Jake's across the room. "Eleanor, I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Age is just a number. What Jake and I have goes way beyond that." As the night went on, Jake and Olivia found themselves in conversation with various representatives of social organizations, all eager to collaborate with the new foundation. The excitement was palpable, and the couple felt energized by the possibilities ahead. In the days following the gala, Jake and Olivia threw themselves into wedding preparations and foundation work. Mornings were filled with planning meetings, afternoons with visits to community centers, and evenings with animated discussions about the future. One afternoon, while visiting a shelter for young people, Jake noticed a boy sitting alone in a corner. Approaching him, Jake recognized the lost look that had once been his own. "Hey, what's your name?" Jake asked, sitting down beside the boy. "Tyler," the boy replied, hesitant. Jake smiled. "Tyler, let me tell you a story. Not too long ago, I was exactly where you are now." As Jake shared his journey, Tyler's eyes widened, a spark of hope igniting within them. Olivia watched from a distance, her heart overflowing with love and pride. It was at that moment she knew, without a doubt, the decision to make Jake co-director of the foundation wasn't just right, it was essential. The weeks flew by, and soon, the wedding day arrived. The Hartwell mansion was transformed. The garden, where Jake had once mowed the lawn, was now decorated with flowers and delicate lights. Before the ceremony, Jake found himself standing in the room where he used to store his cleaning supplies. The irony wasn't lost on him. "Nervous?" Mike's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Jake turned, smiling at his best man. "Not nervous. Grateful. It's hard to believe how much my life has changed." Mike placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. "You were always meant for great things, Jake. Olivia just saw it before the rest of us did." In the garden, the guests took their seats. It was a fascinating mix. Executives in expensive suits sat beside Jake's old neighborhood friends, all gathered to celebrate a love that transcended social and age barriers. When Olivia began her walk down the makeshift aisle in the garden, a reverent silence fell over the crowd. Her eyes locked with Jake's, and in that moment, the entire world around them disappeared. The vows they exchanged were a testament to their unique journey. Jake spoke of second chances and the transformative power of love. Olivia spoke of seeing beyond appearances and finding a soulmate in an unexpected place. "Jake," Olivia said, her voice thick with emotion, "you taught me to see the world with new eyes. With you, I've learned that true wealth lies in the connections we make and the lives we touch." Jake, tears in his eyes, responded, "Olivia, you've given me more than love. You've given me the chance to become the best version of myself. I promise to spend the rest of our lives giving that gift back." When the officiant declared them husband and wife, the explosion of applause and joy was deafening. It was more than a celebration of love. It was a triumph over prejudice and societal expectations. The reception that followed was a vibrant party that lasted into the night. Jake and Olivia danced, laughed, and celebrated with their guests, two worlds merging in perfect harmony. At midnight, the couple stole away for a private moment in Olivia's office. Jake took his wife's hands, looking deeply into her eyes. "Thank you," he said simply. Olivia tilted her head, confused. "For what?" "For believing in me. For giving us a chance. For creating this incredible life together." Olivia smiled, pulling him into a soft kiss. "No, Jake. Thank you for showing me that true love knows no limits." They returned to the party hand in hand, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. Together, they weren't just a couple. They were a force for change, ready to make a difference in the world, one day at a time. Dear viewers, if this story touched your heart, don't hesitate to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your opinion is valuable to us and helps us continue bringing you touching stories like this one. If you haven't subscribed yet, join our community by clicking the subscribe button now so you don't miss any of our upcoming inspiring narratives. Always remember, true love doesn't just overcome barriers, it transforms them into bridges to a better future.